You're listening to Candid Sustainability, the podcast that explores ways we try and sometimes fail to live more sustainably. You know those things you grew up doing that felt like they were just survival or tradition? Turns out some of them were sustainability gold mines before we even knew what that word meant. You're listening to Candid Sustainability, the podcast that explores ways we try and sometimes fail to live more sustainably. I'm Kabelo, a corporate sustainability PhD researcher navigating life across cultures and continents. Here, we talk honestly about trying, failing, and still caring about the planet. So I moved to Europe about 8 years ago. And when I moved here, that was the first time I heard about the concept of sustainability, really. I used to think that sustainability was something new, something that arrived with tote bags, composting bins, and Scandinavian lifestyle influences. You know, that kind of vibe. But then I started thinking, actually, maybe it's not. How did I grow up? In my family, we reused everything. I remember we used to use yogurt tubs as food containers or containers for soap. And we used to use margarine buckets to store rice. We actually have a running joke in the whole country in South Africa that cookie tins, you know, these tins that I don't know what you call it. It's cookie boxes, but it's tin. They are actually sewing kits. If you ever opened it and it found cookies in it, you were probably dreaming. And it's funny because we all know this. Since I grew up wearing my sister's and my brother's clothes, I would always fantasize about the day that I would finally go to the stores and buy clothes that I wanted to wear, things that I felt represented my style. But I mean, this is just how we did things. It wasn't because we were trying to be eco-conscious. We ate food from our gardens, and it wasn't for climate points. It was what was available and affordable. And like I already told you, meat. We used to reserve meat for Sundays, and we didn't call it a plant-based diet or all of that stuff. We just knew that during the week we eat cabbage and pap, beans or milk, or, we just ate vegetables during the week. And then we knew that on Sunday when everybody's home, that's when we're going to eat meat. And we were always told to use grey water to water the garden. And it was always made clear that only do this either during the mornings or in the evenings so that we save water. It was, we did it before it got too hot, but I didn't understand then, but now I know. So it doesn't evaporate. It's simple science. But all of these things were really climate smart behavior. I remember my grandmother, now it sounds like a podcast about my grandmother, but she taught me a lot of things. But she would always, for instance, she would always make us go buy milk and she would make us carry our own containers. So totally threw off my vibe because then I would have to go after school and take a taxi and I would be carrying this big bucket of milk. It just wasn't cool. But it was conscious. It was environmentally sustainable. In actual fact, in South Africa, we have these shops, these little tuck shops. We call them spaza shops. You could actually go there and buy a portion of, say, maize meal, and you can bring your own container. And yes, maybe it's financially inflicted that they do that, but it's sustainable, right? Because maybe people can't afford to go and buy an entire 20 kg of maize meal, but they can just buy a portion that they actually need, and they bring their own containers. So it's less single-use plastic, right? So anyway, when I then moved to Europe, like I was saying, I started to realize that what people here call eco-living or low-impact lifestyles was just what many of us back home did out of necessity or maybe just inherent wisdom. Whatever the case, it was sustainable. And I realized, actually, sustainability didn't start in the global north. It didn't start with zero waste aisles. It's in our culture. It's in our fabric. It's in our very nature. It's how our grandparents used to do things. It's in that home remedy or that homemade dish that we make from the vegetables we got in our garden. We've been doing it all along. We just didn't have the fancy terms that they use in these days and age, right? But I'm telling you all of this because when I first started stepping into what I'll call it professional sustainability spaces, I used to attend a lot of conferences, and I still do. There's lectures and just really simple conversations around sustainability. I often felt like I was a bit out of place, if I'm being honest. I was just like, I just felt like they had a secret language that I hadn't been taught, like that I didn't know. Everyone was talking about carbon offsets or using all these big terms about ESG reporting, supply chain transparency, net zero goals. I was just like, wow, this sounds really important. Meanwhile, my entry point to sustainability, it was completely different. Honestly, I didn't even recognize it as sustainability at the time. I didn't grow up separating my waste because I was trying to it wasn't a conscious environmental ideology. I did it because we just reused everything. It's just what we did. And plastic bags were washed and dried so that we can reuse them again. At first, I thought my helper then was a bit strange, but we just got into it. And now that I know, I was like, actually, she was doing something good, I guess. And we used to use buckets of water to water the garden. And yeah, we just mended clothes. We mended our clothes. There's always, even to this day, I hope, like there's always memamang at the end of the street. There's some lady that can mend your clothes if they're torn, or a guy at the other end of the street that can mend your shoes if they're torn. And we just pass down clothes, and we what do they call it now? We used to upcycle. That's something we've always done. And with food waste, for example, I don't think it even existed or barely existed really, because we stretched every ingredient to its last possible use. And anything that was left behind, we would just give to the other guy at the other street who has pigs so that they can devour the last bits of it. So we've always really been maintaining an entire circular ecosystem. But honestly, when I came to Europe, like I was saying, I just didn't see it that way. I didn't see the things that we did as exemplary. I saw it as just, being broke, if I'm honest. Like I was just like, we're just living like this because we're broke. I thought our experiences and how we were navigating was, I thought it was less than, because I was now in spaces where people could afford to choose to be sustainable. They were talking about how they buy organic or install solar systems or do like zero waste lifestyle. It was a brand, and I was like, hey, I can't relate, right? But it's something that we had already been doing. So for a long time, I just felt like I just didn't belong. Like my sustainability story wasn't valid because it wasn't intentional. It didn't come with certificates or strategies. It came with necessity. So because it came with necessity, I thought maybe it's not good enough. But it is. But now I know better. Those experiences were valid. They are valid. They are part of a much bigger picture, a global story of sustainability that includes wisdom, resilience, and lived knowledge of people who've always done more with less. And those stories matter just as much, if not more, especially when we talk about social justice or inclusion or just the sheer future of sustainability. I often think that it's time for the West or the North to start looking for inspiration from the South. I know in many instances, the South is seen to be lagging behind. But in this instance, maybe it's time for them to look to the South just for inspiration. Yeah, but here's what I've been doing just to bring myself much closer and assert myself in this space is that I've been learning that sustainability doesn't have to have a certain look. It doesn't have to have a twang or look in a way that I thought it should look when I first came to Europe. I'm reclaiming my cultural practices as valid contributions to sustainability because they are. And I'm sharing stories. I'm sharing my story, like this one, to remind myself, but also to remind others that this isn't new for us. We've been contributing and we can certainly continue to do so. So that's today's reminder. You don't have to buy into a new lifestyle to be sustainable. You probably already are in more ways than you think. So let me know, what's one thing you grew up doing that you now realize was actually sustainable? Join me on Substack or comment to contribute to this conversation. What's something from your culture or upbringing that felt sustainable before you knew the word? Let me know. But before you go, Remember to leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Like and subscribe if you are watching from YouTube, and share this with someone who needs a little reminder that they are doing great. Thanks for being here. Let's keep it candid. See you on the next one, and keep doing your best.